Our guest today is the President and Chief Operating Officer of Commonwealth Edison. She is responsible for overseeing the day-to-day operations of ComEd, which delivers electric service to customers throughout northern Illinois. Commonwealth Edison has 5,700 employees and revenues of approximately $6.1 billion. ComEd delivers electricity to approximately 3.8 million residential and business customers across northern Illinois, or 70% of our state's population. Our guest today is a graduate of the DePaul University Law School and served as editor-in-chief of the school's Law Review. Ladies and gentlemen, Anne Pramaggiore. Anne? Up here.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Well, it is my great honor to be here today. I've been a member of the City Club for years, and I've always sat out there. So it's the first time I've been on this side of the podium, and it's a pretty nice view. So before I get started, I have some gratitude to express. I first want to thank Jay Doherty and the City Club. This is a terrific forum, and there aren't a lot of these around where we have a full debate on public issues, issues that affect our future, and I think it's terrific that they provide this forum for us. I also want to thank Sister Rosemary for that wonderful, wonderful prayer, and all the work that you do at Misericordia. We are terrific supporters and fans of what you do, so thank you very much. I want to acknowledge my ComEd colleagues here today. There are a few. To borrow a phrase, it takes a village. And the 6,000 men and women of ComEd do extraordinary work to keep the lights on for our 3.8 million customers. I'm continually humbled by the strength, the tenacity, and the commitment of our employees and of the bond that we share in our village. And to that point, our CEO, Frank Clark, has announced that he will retire in 2012. He'll be with us for several more months, though, and we're grateful for that. He's served ComEd for 46 years, and the impact of his amazing career is felt everywhere in this city. One of his most important legacies is the scope and makeup of our village at ComEd. Our company reflects the diversity of the community we serve, thanks to his commitment. The ComEd Village and the best characteristics of it are the gift of Frank Clark. Thank you. So you may have wondered what's in store for you today. Last week, you heard from ICC Chairman Doug Scott on the views of the ICC regarding grid legislation pending in Springfield. I have great respect for our chairman and for the other members of the ICC. We work hard to work well with the ICC. They are the body that regulates us. And on this legislation, we have many areas of agreement. But today, you will hear about this legislation from a different vantage point. 20 years ago, the essence of the job at ComEd was managing assets and restoring service in the event of outages. But today's world requires something different. Managing the status quo just will not do. We see sweeping changes in our economy, in the way we conduct commerce, and in our day-to-day lives. A sea change even in how we communicate and relate to one another. Most, if not all of this, involves change in how we use electricity. So at ComEd, we have a mission as well as a job, and that mission is to work with our customers, our policymakers, our regulators, to oversee the evolution of the electric grid from a relic of the 20th century to critical infrastructure that will support the new lives we lead and act as an economic engine for Chicago in the 21st century. And I believe to get this right, it is important to view the question of grid modernization through the lens of the future rather than through the worn and cloudy lens of the past. This is not always easy. Imagining the future and embracing change is complex and uncertain, and we don't naturally gravitate to the unknown. In 1878, Oxford University professor Erasmus Wilson commented on the electric light demonstration at the Paris exhibition, and I quote, "When the exhibition closes, electric light will close with it, and no more will be heard of it." Just 2 years earlier, a Western Union executive memo suggested that the emerging telephone has, and I quote, "too many shortcomings to be seriously considered as a means of communication." Now, I think Paul LaCiasa, who is here with us today, would probably dispute that. Both of these supposedly doomed technologies not only shaped the 20th century, they figure even more importantly in the 21st. I manage a business whose legal and regulatory foundations are 100 years old, whose operating model is 100 years old, and whose fundamental technology until recently hadn't changed significantly in 100 years. Thank you. If Alexander Graham Bell, who invented the telephone, stepped out of the 19th century and into the 21st, he would not find his telephone anywhere and would not recognize the technology that has evolved to substitute for it. I could not say the same about the electric power industry. If Thomas Edison and Sam Insull, the innovators of the original grid, took a tour in 2011 of any electric system in the United States, they would not bat an eye. They would see essentially the same technology they deployed 100 years ago operating in much the same way. 100 years ago, the legal framework for the grid required a least cost design standard to serve an economic sector that had no global competition and far less need for high-quality power. 100 years ago, our electric system was designed around plentiful and inexpensive power resources that do not serve today's green ethos. 100 years ago, our grid was designed to serve up a one-size-fits-all product with virtually no transparency to price and no real choice for consumers. But while the grid and our policy around the grid has not changed much in 100 years, our world has. In our daily lives, online transactions have turned the traditional retail model on its head. 50% of our banking transactions are electronic. We are in the middle of a 5-year period in which internet traffic is expected to quadruple, and we tweet 1 billion times a week. In commerce, we see the proliferation of new growth industries, such as data centers, whose entire business model depends on high-quality power services 24/7. Even in the traditional sector of manufacturing, today's industrial processes are run by microprocessors, highly sensitive to electric grid disturbances. We live our lives on the grid. We bank online, we shop online, we conduct friendships online, we even date online. But you all know this because you tell me this all the time in many different ways. A few days after the blizzard of February 2011, I had a customer come to visit me, and he told me about his preparations for that blizzard. Hours before the blizzard hit, he called his wife and his 3 daughters in, and he directed them to plug in and charge. Charge your iPhones, charge your iPads, charge your Blackberries. Those were his storm preparations. So gone are the days where storm preparations were exclusively candles, flashlights, and canned beans. We are also a region and state that stands for a greener future with targets for renewables such as solar and wind. And we envision a future where electric vehicles will have a place on our roads. But solar and wind and electric vehicles require a smarter grid than the one we have today. And our expectations as consumers have changed over the last 100 years. We expect more choice, more information, more control. Yet electricity is probably the only thing you buy where you don't know how much you bought or what you paid for it until you get your bill at the end of the month and it's too late to do anything about it. So it's time for Illinois to build a grid to meet these changes, a grid that provides a platform for the future. 44 other states have this underway. But to build this grid, we need a roadmap, and we are suggesting that our legislation in Springfield, Senate Bill 1652, is that roadmap. The Energy Infrastructure Modernization Act, as you know, it passed both houses of the General Assembly this spring, but was vetoed by the governor last month. So I want to describe this roadmap to you in the context of the three policy objectives that I have just covered, and which I believe justify the investment embodied in the roadmap. First, I think we can all agree that at the center of grid modernization is the consumer. It is you. You as the consumer expect quality, choice, and value for your dollar. Now, as you know, the weather we experienced this summer wreaked havoc on our system, and it left too many customers out of power for too long. While we have established a task force in the company to examine ways to improve our response with the tools we have now, you should know that we believe a significant number of interruptions, well over 100,000 in the July 11th storm, could have been avoided with the tools that we don't yet have, but are provided in Senate Bill 1652. We are told by other utilities that these tools, the tools we don't yet have, can also help us restore faster in those situations. This legislation delivers greater reliability. It requires ComEd to reduce outages by 20% over the course of the investment and improve restoration times by 15%. This will come about through a combination of refurbishing the grid we have, through underground cable repair and pole replacement projects through traditional utility investment, and adding tools of a modern grid, technology that we don't yet have beyond test pilots. This legislation delivers choice and control to consumers. It installs a smart meter in every home, opening a world of consumer information and pricing options that provide opportunities for customers to save money. The legislation requires ComEd to offer a rebate pricing program to customers that receive a smart meter. This program offers a rebate to customers who are willing to reduce usage during the peak hours of the summer. No risk, completely voluntary, but an opportunity for customers to save money. This legislation delivers better and more efficient customer service. We'll be able to reduce estimated bills by 90% and costs associated with meter reading and billing. And once our smart meter system is in place, we are looking forward to a future where you don't need to call us to tell us that your power is out. As my colleague John Hooker likes to say, OnStar can turn your car on from 50 miles away. But unless you call ComEd, we don't know you're out of power 2 blocks away. Well, with smart meters, we'll know. So in a new day of value consumerism, Senate Bill 1652 is a roadmap to better serving our customers. But let's go beyond the direct benefits to consumers. Most of us would agree that a core policy objective moving forward is to create a greener, more sustainable future. The power industry generates about 40% of CO2 emissions in this country, the transportation sector about 33%. You tackle these industries and we've gone a long way to green. This bill increases the energy efficiency dollars available to our customers. The programs we have in place today save our residential customers about $95 million annually. This legislation increases those programs by at least another 10%. It facilitates solar and wind distributed generation and makes electrical vehicle charging systems possible. Senate Bill 1652 is a roadmap for a greener future. Lastly, everyone agrees that our state's most pressing public priority is job creation and an infusion of private capital investment into our economy. We need it now. This legislation offers exactly that. This is a $2.6 billion investment of private capital that ComEd is making. It will give an immediate shot in the arm for Northern Illinois and the state with Ameren involved. The investment program will generate 2,000 jobs in ComEd at its peak. It will mean immediate and significant growth opportunities for Illinois companies that support the electric industry, companies like SNC Electric, Primera Engineering, General Cable, Intren, Meade, Trice Construction, Kenny Construction. There are dozens of Illinois companies capable of supporting grid modernization in some way. When they get more business, they hire workers. And as the Sierra Club stated in their recent op-ed, This bill's environmental provisions will add jobs around solar projects and new energy efficiency programs as well. But beyond the jobs related to modernizing the grid and energy efficiency, this bill will be a catalyst for future economic growth and more jobs. The legislation will infuse money and energy into the burgeoning and energy tech cluster. You've heard of Silicon Valley and the North Carolina Research Triangle. Well, we can do something like this here with a cluster in the Chicago region and in Illinois. We have dozens of energy tech startups coming out of our esteemed university. This legislation creates a utility paid for $20 million fund for those startups to get them rolling. And ComEd has also created protocols on its system for those companies to test their programs and their new technology before it hits the market. Senate Bill 1652 is a roadmap for a stronger, more resilient Illinois economy. So here we have a bill that injects $2.6 billion into the economy over 10 years, puts people to work, improves reliability, and puts in place a modern grid that will help make Illinois more competitive. So why is this controversial? Well, the debate revolves around consumer protections, an area that was heavily negotiated during the General Assembly's spring session. And that negotiation resulted in over 40 changes to the bill, 30 of them substantive. So let's look at the three areas where the critics have focused. First is the price tag. This investment will require about $3 per month increase on the average customer's bill. But the rate increase carries with it a value proposition, and that's something new, that the cost will be more than offset by the benefits of the bill in real and quantifiable ways. This is a program that ultimately more than pays for itself. The benefits of grid modernization for consumers are threefold. First, when ComEd becomes more efficient in its operations thanks to modernizations, the savings will be passed on to consumers. Second, consumers reach tangible savings with fewer outages. And third, consumers will have the opportunity to better manage their energy use. Now, if you take just the first category, the operational savings and efficiency, that benefit alone will deliver value equal to $3 a month. The reliability benefits add another $1 per month. And additionally, taking advantage of several of the energy efficiency programs can more than offset the increase. The energy savings potential from better information and energy management tools is up to you. So you may ask, how do I know these benefits will be delivered? Because the bill requires the utilities to meet performance standards that generate these benefits. If the utility fails, it faces financial penalties, a reduction in profits. This is a value proposition for consumers that doesn't exist today, and this is what Senate Bill 1652 requires. Second is the claim that by some that the bill undercuts existing regulatory processes that protect consumers. Let's look at what the legislation calls for. It calls for annual reviews by the ICC of the utilities' plans, performance, and costs. In these annual proceedings, the ICC retains the authority to lower rates. In these annual proceedings, consumer advocates retain the right to protest our filings. It holds utilities accountable to strict performance standards on reliability and customer service and reduces the utility's profit levels if it fails to meet the standards. It requires 2 check-ins with the General Assembly, first in 2014 and again in 2017 when the entire program terminates and the utility must reapply to the General Assembly to restart the program. If we step away from the rhetoric surrounding this legislation, we will see what several impartial regulatory experts have seen. They tell us that this legislation incorporates one of the most progressive accountability-based regulatory models in the country, protecting consumers in a way the current system does not. Former ICC Commissioner Ray Romero put it this way in his op-ed published this weekend in the Rockford Register-Star. It occurs to me that everyone in these conversations wants the same thing: more accountability from ComEd, a more robust and reliable electric grid, consumer protections, job growth, and economic development. The fact is, Senate Bill 1652 delivers all these benefits. that the regulatory provisions will actually deliver the very things the opponents are calling for. The increased regularity and scope of regulatory oversight and accountability for utilities under this model doesn't exist today, and that is what Senate Bill 1652 requires. Finally, the third objection is that the legislation allegedly guarantees high profits to the utilities. Here are the facts surrounding the legislation. Under this act and under today's conditions, ComEd's profit levels would be lower than the national average for utilities over the last 10 years. It would be the second lowest profit level the ICC has given ComEd in the past 30 years. In fact, it would be lower than the profit ComEd just earned from the ICC in its last rate case decided in May. And there's nothing guaranteed about the profit level. If we don't hit the performance targets that are in the bill, our profits are lowered. If the ICC rejects a cost item we submit, our profits are lowered. The performance standards and the dependency of the utility profits on achieving them does not exist anywhere today, and that is what Senate Bill 1652 requires. One last point before I conclude. The ICC has proposed a different model to try to cut through the regulatory red tape that makes this endeavor so difficult. And we very much appreciate the spirit in which this was offered, but the model has several challenges. First, the proposal covers only half of our costs. It covers our capital investment, but leaves our expenses, such as labor costs, subject to the vagaries of the current unstable system. In essence, it would allow us to buy the poles, but whether we could actually install and set the poles would be uncertain from year to year. Second, an Illinois court decision came down last week on a variation of this model that Peoples Energy piloted. The court overturned the model. Now, the legislature can trump that, but with that kind of precedent, we are concerned that legislation could be subject to challenge, leading to many years of litigation. And we think it's important to do this now. So I will finish with a couple thoughts. First, let me say that there is a wide variety of support for this legislation: business groups, labor unions, and environmentalists. Why? Because they're looking through the lens of the future. Senate Bill 1652 is a driver of economic growth. It will put thousands back to work, and it's a platform for a smarter and greener way to use energy. But what happens if we don't do this? Nothing. Nothing will happen, and that's the problem. We'll remain without the energy infrastructure to support a stronger economy, more reliable delivery of electricity, and options that will allow consumers to better manage their energy bills. We will remain without a modern grid that allows us to compete in attracting high-tech economic growth. Our future won't be as green. So we have a choice between maintaining the status quo or taking action to build a more prosperous future. Others are not waiting. 44 other states are out there taking significant action to modernize their electric grids. They are placing their bets on the likes of Thomas Edison rather than the skeptical Professor Erasmus Wilson, who turned out to be so terribly wrong about the future of electric light. It's time to make a choice, and I thank you for your time today and your attention.
Wait a second.
Oh, back there.
Ginny, work the crowd. Get Brenda in here to work the crowd so we get these questions up here. If you want to do it, you can do it electronically.
Tweet.
Tweet.
Tweet us.
Okay, here we go. Right off the bat. Delane Adams, where are you? I see you. The Citizen Action Illinois. Why does ComEd feel the need to have automatic rate hikes signed into the law?
So one of the challenges to the legislation when we originally filed it was that it contained an automatic rate increase feature. It actually did have a feature where rate increases went into place when we filed it, and any credits back to customers if there were disallowances were done retrospectively. We understood the problems that created, and we changed that. And if you read the legislation that came out at the end of the session that was actually passed in the General Assembly, there is no such thing. Just like today, we make a rate filing. There is a proceeding at which parties can come in and challenge the filing. The ICC will review all our documentation just as they do today, and no rate is set until that entire proceeding occurs. So we did address that concern when we heard about it during the spring session.
Next question is from Scott Musser from ARP. Where are you, Scott? Same table, huh? Okay. I keep my eye on it. Who did ComEd negotiate SB 1652 with on the consumer side?
Well, we spent a lot of time with a lot of different parties throughout the legislative session. We've had conversations with CUB, we've had conversations with the Attorney General's office, we've had conversations with the staff of the House and the Senate. We've had discussions with Center for Neighborhood Technology. So we've had many, many discussions, and I'm not here to represent that any of these parties are, supporting this bill. That's not my place to say, it's theirs. But what I will say is that we spent a lot of time with these parties, and we listened very seriously to some of their concerns, and the 40 changes that were made in the bill reflect, I think, us being responsive to some of those concerns.
Question is from a City Club member, Rob Kelter. That table? No, okay, good. And from the Environmental Law and Policy Center. You got a lot of allies here. Sorry, Eric. Just threw that one in further. Okay, is ComEd willing to go before the Illinois Commerce Commission and let the commission determine the best way to implement smart grid?
Well, Rob, one provision that was added into the bill at the very late in session was there was some concern, particularly about the smart meters, that parties did not feel that just implementing right off of the legislation on the smart meters was the best way to go. They wanted to see a proceeding at the commission where parties could weigh in on how those meters were deployed, what sort of consumer protections would be around them, what sort of education programs would go along with them. And we did put a provision into the legislation that actually provides for a proceeding at the commission that allows all parties to come in and weigh in on those sorts of issues. So that is what we addressed with the smart meters.
We have two more questions. One's anonymous. There's a rule here. If you're going to ask a sandbag question, you have enough guts, even if you write a phony name. Put something on it, okay? Put a name on it. This is in New Jersey. All right. From Martha Janthro, City Club member and governor's member. What are the prospects of creating a national grid rather than a state-by-state grid?
Very interesting question. There's probably not, the prospects, direct answer to that is, not strong. This has been a state-regulated industry at the distribution level for 100 years. In fact, interestingly, Sam Insel, the first CEO of Commonwealth Edison, designed that state-by-state system, so we only have ourselves to blame. But what is becoming more and more uniform across the country is the generation side of the business and the transmission side of the business. Transmission was moved up to the federal level maybe a decade or two ago, but the transmission, the big superhighways of the electric grid, are regulated at the federal level, and so you're starting to see more uniformity there. And similarly, generation, what you're starting to see is as the markets develop, as competitive markets develop on the generation side, you're seeing more regional approach to generation, and it is ultimately regulated at the federal level too. So the last remaining piece is the distribution level, and I think it's unlikely you're going to see much to take away that regulation at the state level anytime soon.
This is a question that's been asked, but this is a little extra. From Brad Block. Where are you, Brad? Okay, I assume you're going to join the City Club after this because you're not a member. You get one mulligan. All right. Is ComEd Is ComEd willing to negotiate with the governor, legislators, ICC, the Illinois Attorney General, and other stakeholders to modify the terms of the bill to address their objections?
Absolutely. We have worked with all those parties for many, many months on this, and we continue to do so. We continue to have dialogue around this. We think this is a very good bill, and hopefully what you heard today supports that. We think it's a good bill for consumers. We think it's a good bill for the economy. We think it's a good regulatory bill, and frankly, there are a number of regulatory experts out there who agree that this is very progressive regulation, and it provides more to consumers than what we have today. But we are always willing to have discussions.
A late write-in, but normally I would not accept this, but it shows some creativity. You don't have to answer this one.
Okay.
This is from Professor Erasmus Wilson. You know old professors never die. Will you forgive me for being so wrong? We have one closing question.
Oh,
This
we're
is
closing.
anonymous. I don't know. That should have been the
That should have
closer.
been the close.
That should have been the closer. But as I said, this is the City Club where, we wear our trunks around our ankles. So here we go. This is from Mr. Anonymous. With the governor's veto, what is the remaining process to get 1652 passed? Mr. Dilworth, if you want to help on this one, you're more than...
I bet she has it memorized.
So the governor has vetoed the bill, and we must go back to the legislature to seek another vote on the bill, a stronger vote than the one that we got in the spring. And so that's what we'll do in the veto session. But as I indicated, always willing to have discussions with people. I think that's important.
How about a big round of applause? We got gifts.